So let's talk missiles in Battletech. Let's talk about potentially flooding the table with lots and lots of missiles. And down there in the info box, pinned to the first comment, some models, some actual missile carrier models by Death Ray Designs. They've got a new range of Battletech tanks that can fill a variety of roles, are scaled to the newer models, and look absolutely fantastic. A tremendous level of detail. We are checking out one of their long-range missile carriers right now on the splash screen, and I'm loving these models because they lead into filling a variety of roles, especially giving a different look to your list. So we jump in, generally speaking, with vehicles. We're just going to touch on this point for those new to the game. Yes, you can go mech to mech, and for a long time I've gone mech to mech. But Battletech has also combined arms. The use of tanks, very important. The use of infantry. Generally speaking, if we look at tonnage and ability, you can buy more tanks for battle value than you can mechs. But of course, that comes at a cost. They're not as survivable. They're not as maneuverable. And they tend to take motive hits and take damage differently and in a higher capacity than mechs. But if we're talking about high volume weapons where you can mount multiples for a fraction of the battle value, it's pretty attractive. It's pretty attractive. So it's a great way to get some more stuff on the table for the battle value, but tactically you have to know how to use it. So when we explore missiles, for the battle value, long-range missiles, short-range missiles, mounted on mechs, dedicated mechs. Two examples that come to mind. Dedicated LRM machines would be the Archer, or more accurately, the Longbow. A dedicated SRM mechs, first one that comes to mind, the Javelin, the one with the two SRM six-packs, left torso, right torso. So focusing on that, and you have a few mechs that have a little bit of both, where they'll have long-range and potentially short-range mechs. But generally speaking, in vehicles, for the battle value, they tend to divide out into, if I want to flood the table with missiles, then I'm going to specialize. There are some tanks that, of course, will have autocannons and lasers with a missile pack, a long range or a short range. And they give you some bite going in. They give you something to do going in. But if we focus out to LRMs, your first two options are the long-range missile carriers and the short-range missile carriers. The long-range missile carrier is stock. Now, there's variants. There's different ones. We're talking about the good old generic LRM carrier. 3 20-packs. That's real-time crazy missiles on the table. And the fact that it has the redundancy, meaning 3 packs at 20 each, this is an indirect fire beast. Even just taking one of them now has massive gains where if you park that, this thing can advance with the Lance, but if you can park that and take advantage of cover, there are going to be other spotting opportunities. Maybe it's a dedicated spotter, but from this perspective, you load up lots and lots of long-range missiles. You look at a dedicated LRM carrier or some of its variants. Absolutely. The downside to that is these carriers don't have a lot of armor. They don't have maneuverability, and they really they have no short-range support. So if a mech appears on the horizon, you're in trouble. So you either have to have it attached to a support group, or maybe you have a bodyguard mech or another vehicle guarding it. But we've gotten into that, and I've explored that, pushing up more in depth to my channel here under the Battletech playlist. So we see the LRM carriers. Jumping in on the short side, we see the SRM carriers, and I have to recommend you need to pick up a short-range missile carrier. You do. I mean, if there was a list of auto-includes to have, if I can control my enthusiasm, you need 2 Karnovs, you need some infantry, you need some APCs, and some goblins. That's the first buy-in group. And this is to go... These are combined arms that you were going to utilize regardless of the mechs and the tactics that you utilize. These are just going to be a lot of fun to play. A lot of fun to play. So that's the first group. The second group is going to be short-range missile carriers. And again, the Death Ray Designs, they've got a lot of great tanks that will fill in for this, and we're looking at the missile carrier that could work both as LRM and SRM. The short-range missile carriers are so much fun to play because the first time you see that tech sheet, you're like, there's got to be a misprint. This can't be right. It's a little pricey for battle value for a vehicle, but there is a lot of missiles on this thing. It's like kicking over the beehive. I mean, assault mechs don't want to eat face and get hit right point blank with these missiles. It's crazy. Light mechs are scared running away. Medium mechs are like, I can't take that hit. Now, the challenge here, to be fully honest, you've got a short-range missile carrier that has higher battle value because it's pricey, but still much less because it's a vehicle. It's a point-blank weapon system. It's a giant block of SRMs. It's got nothing else. It's got no armor. It's got nothing. From that perspective, if you're on like an open field map, you're out in the open, you're going to get tagged and get killed really quick. Or what's more impactful compared to the LRM carrier, you take motive hits. Vehicles take motive hits. This idea that the treads, the wheels, the mobility of it gets chewed up, gets damaged. They slow down. They physically can't move as much. They can't turn as much. You burn more to turn. For such a short-range missile carrier, you're in a lot of trouble if you start taking motive hits. LRM, I don't want to take motive hits, but I could eat a little bit. I could take a little bit on there, especially since I've got massive reach out and pelt you with or soak you with lots of these LRM missiles. A lot of fun too. So the short-range missile carrier, yes, there's a lot of what ifs. You got to pull off the correct terrain. You've got to know when to hit. You've got to know when to advance. But if you can, they are game changers and they are so much fun to play. They're also an interesting distraction unit. And I'm not saying that it's irrational, but if you're in a defensive position, or if you're in a position where you have to move to multiple places and you're like, all right, left side of the table, I really don't want to put a lot of resources in there because I'm kind of trying to focus my units, but that leaves me open to an outflank if my opponent's taking some Jenners or taking some fast mediums. What do? You park an SRM carrier or two there. That's refused flank. They're not coming up the flank because they're looking and saying, I can't eat all those missiles. And two things are going to happen. I can get up there with my mech. I can get up there and deal a lot of damage and probably kill your SRM carrier. But I'm trading that other mech in the process. Is it worth it? And that's assuming if it works out. If it doesn't work out and I don't destroy that SRM carrier, but even if I really damage it, it's still on the table, I just traded a mech. So there's a lot of very, very interesting aspects, a lot of fun. So your second option is to take SRM carriers. And I consider if we're looking at your next kind of focus, you want 2 to 3 LRM carriers, 2 to 3 SRM carriers. And again, the death ray designs that could proxy for both. That's going to have some bite. That's going to have a lot of fun. That's going to really, really help boost your lance. The last aspect, which I would look into, looking into last, combinations. They're kind of a what if, where if you feel like you want to use missiles, an example would be the Striker. And I love the Striker. I kind of prefer the updated metal model as opposed to the older because it looks a little bit smaller, the older model. But I do have both based on the timeline. The Striker combat vehicle is interesting. Not a lot of battle value, but it mixes in an LRM and an SRM platform. Now, it does neither one really well, but for the buy-in, it has support for both. It's tracked. It's not hovered. It's not super fast. It's not super slow. I find these for lower battle value games because the SRM carriers and the LRM carriers, they're absolutely worth it. But they're expensive for vehicles, not as expensive as what you get on a mech. They're expensive for vehicles. And sometimes you say, look, I want to get my massive mechs on the table, but I still want to have some missile support for whatever reason. The Striker is an interesting model because you have the LRM pack that can give you some missiles downrange on the way in. You could have it park and do indirect, but also it has that short range punch for the SRM pack. And being a vehicle, yes, we're operating at minimums for the potentially minimums for the LRM pack, long range missiles, But I'm going to fire those anyway, even at short range. I'm going to be firing in tandem both of those parts of it. So there's a lot of potential examples of filling out your collection with missiles and combined arms and tanks. And in doing that, I would say absolutely auto-include some dedicated LRM carriers, absolutely auto-include some SRM carriers. And once you've done that, and you filled out your infantry and your Karnov, then look and say, okay, and artillery, but we'll get to that. Then I would add the striker, because it's neat, it's fun to play, but it's very, very situational and very, very low to mid battle value. And you really have to know when to use it, because again, it is so focused and it is so specialized. It is easy to potentially become disappointed with it. And the last thing we want is to throw down battle value on the table and not get the maximum battle value, or worse, get killed by it.